Hello, my name is Carrie and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a quarterly reflection and wrap up on the first 3 months of 2026. So my typical videos here on YouTube are related to the books that I read and the books that I want to read, but I also have a lot of interests outside of reading, and this year I have been doing my own daily planner. And in this planner each month I have been setting up some goals, both in terms of the things that I'm reading, personal life, and maybe like things that I want to watch or do during the month. Also, I have been keeping track of these with different habit trackers, and I thought it would be a fun idea to kind of go over what I have been working on in these first 3 months of 2026 and kind of talk about the ebbs and flows of my life outside of books. First, I want to start off with statistics for the quarter, but in order to go over the statistics, I need to first show you what exactly I have been measuring. And so I'm going to start off with a photo of my January monthly habit tracker. As you can see in this month, I was only tracking 3 things. I was tracking my workouts for the month, reading, and I had a goal of averaging about 7,000 steps per day. So in January, the squares are color coded, and you can kind of see that I have added in some information about recipes and some movies and TV shows, and that is something that I ended up wanting to track in the later months. As we moved on to February, my habit tracker changed a little bit. So I was tracking reading, workouts, and steps over 7,000. And then I also had like an additional part for over 8,000 steps per day. But I also wanted to track the movies and TV that I was watching and the new recipes that I was trying. And this form kind of stuck for March. I continued to track workouts, reading, walking over 7,000 steps and over 8,000 steps, but I also maintained this new tracking of recipes that I tried and movies and TV that I watched. So over the 3 months, these really stayed the same, and I really enjoyed tracking this different data with the squares and different color coding. Now let's look at the statistics of those things that I tracked. So first of all, steps. This year, I really wanted to focus on upping my steps gradually to 10,000 steps a day. And I really did a good job with this. I think like in terms of the steps that I tracked for 22 out of 31 days in January, I tracked over 7,000 steps. In February, I tracked only 12 out of 28 days. And in March, it was about 15 out of 31 days. In February and March, that's where some discrepancies started. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about why that is once I get into the next section, which are my statistics for workouts. So in 2026, I wanted to incorporate strength training into my workouts. I have been kind of working on these 3-month plans to diversify the types of exercise and movement that I've been doing to fuel my body. And I, at the end of 2025, discovered Sydney Cummings, and I really enjoy her workouts. And so I wanted to start 2026 with her Summertime Fine Challenge. And in January, I did 18 days of working out. February were 12 days and March were 6 days. Now, you may notice that there is a cutoff in February and March, both in steps and in workouts. And this is because I actually experienced 2 separate issues. The first was a hamstring strain. I have really tight hamstrings in my left leg because of some previous injuries to my knee and foot. And I learned that basically I needed to be doing a much more extensive warm-up, and that certain moves that I was doing in the workout series were just not great for the limitations of my body in that way. And so I went to a physical therapist, and that started to improve a lot. But then I got a new pair of tennis shoes and unfortunately developed plantar fasciitis from them. I was really disappointed in this because I have used this tennis shoe brand for about 5 years now, and I've never had an issue with their shoes before. And I don't know if this is an issue with the shoes that are specifically released in Turkey, or if it is an issue with the brand as a whole now, or just the specific type of shoe that I got. Unfortunately, there are times in Turkey where there are brands, like very popular brands, that sell here, and the items are a little bit lower quality than in other places. Adidas is one big one that there is a huge discrepancy in buying shoes here versus in another country. So yeah, that has been my experience with workouts in the first quarter. I wanted to incorporate more movement this year because in the end of 2025, I was working out pretty regularly, but I was doing kind of the same exercises over and over again. And I wanted more variety in that. And I still really enjoy Sydney Cummings workouts, but I think I'm going to need more time to build up to some of the ones that I really would like to do in her programs. Now let's talk about the film and TV that I watched. I watched a total of 9 movies. I finished 3 TV shows, and I watched a total of 14 TV seasons, which is kind of insane to me because I am perpetually behind on TV shows and I have a really big problem of starting series and never finishing them. So I'm really glad that I did a little bit better with this than I actually expected. And I think a big part of this is honestly that I really wanted to try to watch at least 1 movie per week. I really would like to watch the popular movies that everyone is talking about, or, you know, classic movies that I've never really been exposed to, and talk about TV shows that are pretty popular. So I really prioritize working on this in the first quarter, and I think that it has reminded me of, you know, yes, it is very nice to be able to be on top of like these things and to be a part of like the cultural moment, but also I do really struggle with sitting down and watching TV or watching movies because it's such a long time in front of a screen. And so I kind of have been thinking as I'm moving into this new quarter, what are the things that I maybe want to change about this movie watching and TV watching, and how could that maybe, you know, improve? I do have a list of the best movies that I watched and the worst movies that I watched. I'm really happy to say there were 4 movies that I would consider favorites that I found from this movie watching period. The first one is Hamnet. This was a Oscar darling, and I definitely see why. Although in the first half of this movie, because in Turkey they actually always have a pause at like 50% of the way through the movie as like a break time. And in the first 50% of the movie, my friend and I were talking and we were really confused about what was going on. We didn't really like it that much. We didn't feel so invested in the story, but the second half really pulled us in and it was incredibly emotional. I think that I can definitely understand why she won Best Actress because wow, what a performance. And the ending of the movie, going back to the beginning, because I have actually rewatched this since, I now kind of understand more of why the beginning is structured the way that it is. The second favorite movie that I had was Belfast, with one of my favorites from Outlander, Katrina Balfe. And I didn't realize that this is a kind of a semi-autobiographical film about Kenneth Branagh's time growing up in Belfast during the Troubles. It's a black and white movie that is so incredibly shot. Like, the cinematography is just incredibly well done, and this is a movie that I really feel like I understood why people become obsessed with, like, the background of movies and the style of how it's filmed and the actors, because yeah, it was just really, really wonderful. After that, I watched 2 movies that are considered probably classics by now. The first one being Jurassic Park. I never watched this movie before, and Jeff Goldblum made it so incredibly worth it. But even outside of his adorable appearance, I really loved this movie. I definitely see why it is a classic. I think the way that they did so many things in this movie really had to be so groundbreaking for the time that it came out, and it was just very well done. The last one was a rom-com, and that is While You Were Sleeping. I love Sandra Bullock, but I realized I haven't watched a lot of her older movies, and so I wanted to go back, and this was just one that was available to me on Netflix. I thought it was so cute. It's this woman who kind of pretends to be in a relationship with a man who's in a coma and ends up kind of developing feelings for his brother instead. It was like the quintessential 90s rom-com, and I really enjoyed it. It's such a cute movie, and I think it's one that I will definitely return to over like the winter season, because it does have such like an atmospheric tone to the story as well. So yeah, that one was definitely a good one to end on for my favorites. Now, where there is good, there is also bad. And there was one movie that I want to talk about that was truly really bad. And it was called 7 Women and a Murder. This was my fault. So a group of friends, they wanted to do like a murder mystery night, and I had recently heard that 7 Dials was put on Netflix, and I confused 7 Dials with this movie, and we started it and we were all really confused because it was in Italian, and we were like, wait, this is supposed to be an Agatha Christie like story. I thought, what's going on? I had completely messed up, and instead we got this hysterically campy movie that was like truly awful. It was funny. Like the actual mystery is pretty hysterical. The acting is pretty bad. There is one woman who literally her face does not move because she's had so much plastic surgery and Botox. The dialogue, we watched it with dubbing, which is not really my favorite way to watch, but some friends insisted on it, and so yeah, it was very cringy, but also a little bit like good because of how campy it was, but it's definitely not a movie I would recommend to other people. It was an experience. In terms of the TV shows that I watched, I just kind of want to give an update on like those shows and what I was watching. I'm officially all caught up with Heartstopper, which is really exciting because they have a finale movie that is coming out in, I think, July, maybe June. I am on season 4 of Sex Education, which is actually, this was hard for me because I was rewatching this. I had previously stopped around season 3, and then I made it all the way back to season 4, and I still kind of feel like in a rut with this. I don't know what, there's just something about like the transition from season 3 to season 4 that I don't really like. And I think like there are some issues with like the storytelling during that time. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm on season 5 of Peaky Blinders and really hoping to finish that soon, but it is hard. That show is so depressing in so many ways. And similarly, I restarted and rewatched Killing Eve. I love Sandra Oh and Jodie Comer both, so I was really enthusiastic about this, but it is another show that is really dark and really sad, and so I have made it up to the beginning of season 3 on that one, which is farther than I ever made it before. So I'm pretty proud of that. That one's pretty short. I think that I will finish it like relatively soon. And I finished 2 series that were new to me that I started in the new year. The first one is How to Get to Heaven from Belfast. This is from the creators of Derry Girls. I really enjoyed this. I definitely don't think it is comparable to Derry Girls. Like it is more of like a thriller comedy, which is a little bit odd. Like some of the tone is difficult at times, but it has a really talented cast, and I really think like the mystery aspect to it was interesting. But there were some things I was really confused about in terms of how it wrapped up certain storylines. I think there's going to be another season of this, and I'm curious to see what exactly it will focus on, because there's kind of like 2 different plots that they could take it, and so we'll see if that ends up happening. And perhaps the best series that I watched and finished was His and Hers. This is an adaptation of, I think, an Alice Feeney book. I might be wrong about that. This was phenomenally done. It was truly a series that I have like not stopped talking about since finishing it. I've recommended it to so many people. Really well done for a cast that I wasn't that enthusiastic about. The male lead, I think his name's maybe John Bernthal. I could be totally wrong about that. I'm just not a fan of his in terms of what he's done. And Tessa Thompson is really 50-50 for me in terms of what I have liked of hers and what things I haven't. So yeah, that's kind of like how I approached the series, but I'm really glad that it was so incredibly good because it was also kind of like the perfect length with it being a shorter series. Now, the reading that I tracked. So reading was the thing I was pretty good about. I read for almost all of January, 27 out of 31 days. February was 19 out of 28 days, and March was 15 out of 31 days. I am not really shocked that March was the least because there is something about March every year that I perpetually end up in a reading slump, and I'm not quite sure why. I think a big part of it this year was that I wasn't really enjoying a lot of what I was reading. February to March, there was a big slump in the books that I picked up. And there's also a couple books that I talk about in my March wrap up where I was really losing steam on them and not really enjoying them, but also didn't know how to rate them. And so, yeah, I think it was just that I have been in a funk with the books that I'm reading, and I'm hoping that that will improve in the long run. Now let's take a look at the last metric that I was tracking, which were recipes and things that I made. I wasn't exactly tracking everything that I was cooking, but I was trying to average about 3 to 4 new recipes per month because I have an incredibly long backlog of recipes that I want to try, and I wanted to prioritize making my way through some of those. Now, I am happy to say that I did make 12 different recipes over the 3 months, so that's really great. I have, met that goal of 4 every month. However, there were some recipes that I was also returning to that I'd previously done that I wanted to improve upon. So in terms of what I was really, trying and experimenting with, there was much more than 12. I want to talk about some of the really big highlights from the things that I made. The first one I want to talk about is this harissa salmon. This was a sheet pan meal that I believe is from the Defined Dish. I will link any of the recipes down below. And it was so incredibly yummy. It was really easy to make. Everything literally just goes on one pan and can be cooked together. And it was very flavorful and delicious. I love this. I've been trying to incorporate more salmon into my diet at least like once a week. And this has been a great way to do that. I've made it several times since, and it has definitely gone into the regular rotation. The only other like big meal that I made was harira soup. This was from Taste of Morocco, and this was amazing. This is a soup that was definitely a labor of love. It took about, I think like 3 or 4 hours to make this, but it is so incredibly worth it in terms of the flavor and the amount of soup that you get. It is a mix of like a lentil and rice soup, or maybe it was lentil and white bean now that I think about it. I think I might have just added rice with it, but it was so incredibly flavorful. I made this at the beginning of Ramadan as an easy, nutritious meal that I could go back to over the month, and it worked perfectly for that. Along with this, I also had some beef samosas that I made. I followed a pretty vague recipe from a TikTok user that I will still link below, and I kind of freestyled some additions to it based on what I had. And this turned out so good. I was so excited to make a large batch of samosas for the month. Unintentionally, I made like 70 plus of these, which was kind of great because I could eat them through the month. And then also for Eid, we still had quite a few that we could, you know, have. I definitely will keep making this to like stock my freezer pretty regularly because they're just so delicious. Another kind of like appetizer or like snacky side that I made were these jalapeno popper pastries. I found this on TikTok randomly, and I am a big fan of just stuffing things in puff pastry, and this worked remarkably well. It tasted exactly like a jalapeno popper, and these I made specifically for Eid because with the amount of puff pastry I had, it was going to be perfect where each person could have one. And these did not last for more than 10 minutes. Like, I truly had only finished like half of mine, and everyone was asking, are you gonna finish the other half? Are you gonna do this? Because they turned out so good. I will definitely be making these again. I am also thinking about making a crab rangoon version, so I will keep you updated on that. And then because I love baking, I also made 2 cookie recipes. One was actually fixing a recipe that I had previously made and had a total fail with. And these are Merin Karim's mango lassi cookies, which I think she has now renamed to mango cardamom cookies. The first time I made these, I made a critical error in that I put them in the freezer instead of the fridge, and that completely sabotaged the texture, the rise, everything with these cookies. I will insert a photo of the first time I made these. You can see how terrible they look. They looked inedible. They tasted amazing, but they looked terrible. And I was really frustrated because it's such a simple cookie recipe, and I was like, how could I have done this wrong? And then I realized I was supposed to put them in the fridge, not the freezer. I went back and did like a test batch to retry the recipe in the fridge, and they turned out lovely. And then I made a third batch of these for Eid, and they turned out beautiful. I have since made this like 2 or 3 more times because truly it is a very easy cookie recipe that tastes so incredible. It tastes like you are having a mango lassi, and it is something that I have brought in for coworkers. I've brought them in for my students. I've shared with friends, and everyone asks me, what is the recipe for this? Because it is so good. And I do agree with them on that. And then the other cookie that I made was a Cozy Kitchen. I love her recipes. I have never had a bad recipe from her. Truly, she is a trusted voice in the cooking world for me. And she has a chai snickerdoodles recipe that I had been eyeing for a couple years now, and I made them, and I couldn't stop making these. I'm not kidding. For like, I think most of like end of February into March, I was making these like at least once a week. They were so good, and I really like, I cannot emphasize enough how that chai sugar on top, it just tastes like you are having a chai latte. And it is so incredibly warm and comforting, and I just was so incredibly happy that I gave these a shot. It's a great reminder that, you know, these recipes that you save for so long, some of them could end up being absolutely amazing. However, there are some that can end up going terribly wrong. And the first one that I want to talk about is this maple miso chicken recipe that I got from, I think, Marvin. And I don't know what was off with this. I think that it was something with the miso that I used, because something about the flavor of this was just not right. And I, unfortunately, had prepped this in advance for Ramadan, where I was putting this in the freezer, and then I was going to like de-thaw it in just like the Instant Pot, or I think I ended up just de-thawing it in the fridge. something in one of the ingredients, it definitely should not have been frozen. And I'm really questioning if it was the miso, because we only have one brand of white miso available here and it doesn't look like any other white miso I've ever seen before. But I was really disappointed in this because I had really been looking forward to having some Asian-esque food and it just did not turn out how I thought. The other one was a baking fail, and that was the strawberry shortbread cookies. I can't remember the creator that I got this from because it was like the first time I'd ever tried a recipe from them. I want to be very clear that this was user error. This was not the recipe's fault here. I rolled these out way too thin, and I questioned this as I was rolling them out because I'm like, that looks like such a thin shortbread. I should have trusted my instinct and like redone it, but I did not have the time. I was like making these for something. And so they were super thin. They did not bake correctly because of this. In terms of they baked very unevenly, there were some of them that I could salvage and I still brought them to work. And like you can see, there's a semi-beautiful picture here. They looked okay. They tasted really good, but I would really like to make this again and make them the correct size because they completely lost their shape. I had used like a very cute like flour cookie cutter that was just like gone. They all turned into pancakes. Unfortunate, still, I think it was okay. So those were all the things that I was tracking. But outside of those, there were some other things that I had going on in these 3 months that I would like to talk about as well. The first one is music. I really got into music over these 3 months, and there were albums that I could not stop playing on repeat. The first one is What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. I had been wanting to listen to this one since reading They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib because there is kind of a beautiful love letter interspersed throughout that book to this album. And I picked it up in January and I think that it was such a perfectly timed listen. Like there is so much in this album that Marvin Gaye wrote in like, I think it was the 1970s about insane world that he was seeing around him and how hard it was and how difficult it was to be, you know, happiness and find joy. And I really felt that in January. And so I think that this was just a really wonderful album in terms of reminding me of this like commonality of experience. Another one that I could not stop listening to is With Heaven on Top by Bryan. It was like truly nonstop repeat for me. I loved this album. I'm a big fan of Bryan's, especially since his Great American Bar Scene album. This one was a really nice follow-up to that. I think that he's exploring a lot more in this. There were a lot of songs that really have stuck with me and I just absolutely loved. I think that he's a very talented songwriter. You can definitely understand the influence of poetry and, you know, American culture in his music, and I really love that. Now, I wasn't only listening to music over these 3 months, I also really got in deep to 2 podcasts. The first one being Maintenance Phase. This is with Aubrey Gordon, and I cannot remember the other host's surname. I know his first name is Mike. He also hosts one of my favorite other podcasts, which is called If Books Could Kill. Maintenance Phase is focused on like diet culture and the insane like wellness industry, and I deep dived into this. I went through their entire backlog in the 3 months of the new year. I really love their banter. I also love the topics that they look at and how they go through these topics and kind of analyze them, because especially with some of the insane diet trends, they look at the actual studies that these things are citing, the claims they're making, and why these are so problematic and the actual reality behind them. And it's just very well done and very well researched. The other one that I have been obsessed with is called Well I Laughed, and they are available on YouTube, so I will actually link them down below. The hosts are a teacher named Grant and I think she's an engineer named Maya, who are just really good friends, and they are explaining topics to each other that they find interesting. And I really enjoy their banter and, you know, hearing about their lives, but also the stories that they choose to focus on and the way they explain them is very fun. This has been a really fun listen for me over like my lunch breaks or when I'm like cleaning my apartment, because I can just kind of lock in on the story that they're talking about and get other things done, but I still remember what they're talking about. I can still focus on the stories that they're providing. Yeah, I really have enjoyed that. And I think both of those podcasts are really great and doing great things. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about those. Besides those, I have been doing some craft projects, mostly junk journal pages, because I am trying to finish up my junk journal that would be officially 2025. I haven't even started or planned anything for 2026 besides like some things from March that I will talk about in a minute. So those have really been like the biggest priority for me of finishing up some pages. Like I finally worked on a couple pages for Germany, a couple pages for things that I found fun or interesting. But I am really behind on finishing that up, and I would really like to finish it up by this summer, because if I don't, then I'm gonna have that book with me for like another year, and I don't want to have to worry about it. So I'm hoping to be able to like leave it at home this summer with like my other scrapbooks. That's been one of the biggest projects. I also started a cross stitch project with these granny squares, but you might notice I have definitely messed up the numbering of one of the squares, and I need to go back in and like fix this, but I have had no motivation to do so. I'm hoping that I'll finish it in the next quarter, because I mean, it's a small project. I really should finish it, but I don't know how I'm gonna be feeling about it. This is one that I've been working on while crafting with a friend. We do like a craft and chat, or like a craft and book club session where we listen to an audiobook together and just kind of discuss. And so that has motivated me a lot more to do these craft projects, because otherwise I would be procrastinating them forever. Now, another thing that I want to talk about, which I won't actually show the pages in my journal for like privacy reasons, but at the end of every month, I have been doing 2 pages in my journal for statistics, my favorite things of the month, and then like a monthly reflection. And so I want to talk about my favorite experience or event from each month, because I think that these are like really important things to highlight, especially now, to like highlight the good and the times that made me very happy. First off, in January, I went to Albania to visit one of my best friends. We used to work together, and this last year she moved to Albania for a new job, and we have still kept in touch and are still incredibly close. But this was my first time getting to see her since she left Turkey, and it was really lovely. I really enjoyed my time in Albania and in Tirana. They have these really cool buildings there. They're trying to get like a Guinness World Record for like the most interesting design buildings or something like that. So there were really awesome buildings, and like the people were so incredibly friendly. The food that we ate was so good. So I am really happy that I prioritized this, because January is one of the few times in the school year that I do get a break if I take admin leave. And so I'm really glad that I use that time to my advantage. The next one is kind of like a bleed over from the middle of February to the middle of March, and that is Ramadan. I was really happy this year because I felt much better prepared for Ramadan. The year before, experiencing some health issues, so I couldn't fast during that time. And this year I had more checkups with my doctor. I was doing some meal prepping, and like the samosas, the harira soup, I was really preparing these things in advance so that I could have an easy transition into it. And it was beautiful, it was wonderful, and I really felt like it came at the right time this year and really refreshed me in so many ways. And I got to celebrate and host Eid with my friends, and we had lovely, lovely food. I might insert a photo of one of the plates, because I didn't get a lot of photos of the food itself, but it was a really lovely time shared with amazing people. And last but not least, in March, I celebrated my birthday. I had a really great time with friends. We went out for buffalo wings. I know that sounds insane, but there's one good place in the city that has buffalo wings, and I was determined to have them because I had been craving them. We also went to like an art exposition that was really cool. I'll insert some photos here because there were some really beautiful artworks. However, this was my second year going to this, and the year before there were more like mixed media pieces. For example, there was a whole costuming exhibit, and this year it was much smaller, and the art styles really kind of bled into each other a little bit. So I only found a few unique pieces that I thought were really interesting, but that was really fun to do as well. And then in the evening, we ended up going to a karaoke event, and that was a great time. There is nothing like, you know, just having a night out with your friends, singing all the cringy old songs in the loudest and bravest voices when you really should not be. But it was a good time, and I am really thankful that my friends, you know, took the time to celebrate with me. And yeah, it was especially nice because I had entered 2026 with a lot of general anxiety. So it was nice to really have this time to celebrate and be excited for something. I'm really looking forward to this next quarter. I am definitely glad to be ending the first 3 months of the year, and I am hoping that the future holds even better things ahead. I think that's all that I have to talk with you about today, and I hope that you enjoyed this type of video. I would love to hear about how you started off 2026 and what you have been listening to, what you've maybe been doing in life, or how things have just been going for you. What have you been prioritizing? What have your goals been? Because I love talking about these things with people. So I hope that you enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much. Until next time, bye.